Hey guys, it's Adam back with a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. And guys, I got to ask you something. Most people assume that the tax code is designed to take more of their money. But what a lot of people don't realize is the IRS also gives very, very specific ways for people to legally keep more of what they earn. The problem is not that these opportunities don't exist. The problem is that most people either never learn from them, maybe misunderstand how they work, or they just wait too long to take advantage of them. And you step back and you really study the tax code, you realize something very, very important. The system, it rewards ownership, long term thinking, investing, planning, just financial discipline. So today, again, on a brand new episode of The Pursuit of Progress, my co host Ben and I are going to break down 7 of the biggest ways that people legally reduce their taxes and they build wealth more efficiently over time. Not loopholes, not gimmicks, just strategies and rules that already exist inside the system today. With that being said, Ben, let's jump into it. Talk to us about the first one of these 7 that we're going to share with the audience today.
Yeah, the first one of the 7, and this is really one of the most impactful, but it's also one that, in my opinion, needs to be updated because this has not been updated in almost 30 years. And what it is home sale tax exclusions on primary residences. So one of the biggest wealth building advantages in America right now is how primary residences are taxed when sold. Right now, many homeowners can exclude up to $250,000 in gains if single and up to $500,000 if married. Completely tax-free, but there are rules. Generally, you need to live in the property for at least 2 out of the past 5 years. And this becomes powerful when you realize how much appreciation has happened over the last 20 to 30 years. Some homeowners have built hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax-free equity just by owning real estate over time. And this is why homeownership is such a massive long-term wealth builder, not just appreciation, but what you actually get to keep after taxes. And this is based off of there's always some confusion. And that's one of the questions that I get from folks is, how is this actually calculated? Or what if I refinance when I own the property and I took equity out, I paid down debt? How is this number calculated? So it's calculated. First, you have to verify what you paid for the property, whether that was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then you're going to determine what you sold the property for, less any real estate commissions, closing costs, and improvements. And that number there, the net profit number, the net proceed number, is what is going to be how that's calculated. So it's possible to sell the home for over $500,000 if you're married, and even if the proceeds, though, are less than that because of closing costs and other items, that net tax free, that net proceed number is tax free up to $500,000 for married filers, $250,000 for single filers. Huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think just we need to do a whole separate episode just on that first talking point and just how we're both very passionate about how the legislature needs to get updated. It needs to go from 250 to 500 to 500 and a million or something much higher.
Yeah.
Again, because that's been the same dollar amount for the last 20 or 30 years. And you think about how much property values have gone up in that time period.
Yeah, income, inflation. And honestly, like to go back to 1996 or 1997 levels, it would probably be 750,000 and $1.5 million.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
there's been a lot of discussion that if that happened, that could really help unlock this housing market right now, because there are a lot of baby boomers who have been in their homes for decades and they are hesitant or afraid to sell because it could potentially unlock massive tax implications that they don't necessarily want to pay. And so that is a huge talking point for tax policy, real estate policy, and one of those things that could actually make a meaningful difference with this housing market.
So let's next talk about Roth IRA distributions because this is another big one. So, Roth accounts are one of the most powerful long-term tax strategies available. You contribute money after taxes, but qualified withdrawals later, they come out tax-free. That includes contributions, growth, and even investment gains. Completely tax-free if the rules are followed. And the strategy here is very simple. Pay taxes now so you may not have to later. A lot of people focus entirely on tax deductions today, but Roth actually kind of flips that conversation because if tax rates rise over the next, 20, 30 years, having that tax-free income later in life becomes incredibly valuable, especially in retirement planning.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the long-term capital gains. This is also where the conversation starts shifting from earned income to ownership, because long-term capital gains are taxed differently than regular income. Earned income would be something like you have a job, you're W-2, you're an entrepreneur, income that you're earning from your sweat, your effort. Capital gains is different. It's going to be where you're selling something, could be real estate, stock, you're selling some type of asset. And depending on income levels, some people may legally pay 0% federal tax on long term investment gain. And this surprises a lot of people. The tax code clearly treats working for money differently than owning appreciating assets. And this is why the wealthy a lot of times will own assets that go up in value, not just because they're going to increase in value and potentially pay dividends or rental income, but it's also in alignment with how the tax code is written, and they're going to get favorable tax breaks. So, and once people understand that, their financial strategy will start to change because wealth is often built through ownership, through stocks, real estate, businesses, investments, and not just paychecks.
All right, so now let's talk about inheritances and step up in basis. One of the most understood topics in finance. Most inheritances are not considered federal taxable income when they receive it, but the really important concept here is something called step up in basis. And what that means is that inherited assets, they often reset to current market value at death. So if somebody inherits a property or a stock portfolio and then they sell shortly afterward, they may owe very little capital gains tax compared to what the original owner owed. This is one of the biggest reasons that wealthy families focus so heavily on estate planning and that generational wealth transfer. Preserving wealth is not just about building it, it's also about transferring it efficiently.
And this is big. I went through this when my mom passed. She had bought a home here in Denver back in the mid '90s for around 130,000, and at the time of her untimely passing, it was worth about 800,000. And so if that property would have been sold without a step up basis, I mean, there'd be that's a huge potential tax consequence there. And keep in mind that if it's not a primary residence, the tax implications, that tax exemption does not apply. So that only applies to primary residences. But because of the step up basis, you get to bring up when it's passed to the beneficiaries, when they take over the property, it is then stepped up to what the current market value is. So just a tremendous benefit to taxpayers. And what I want to talk about next was life insurance proceeds. This is another great one. Life insurance proceeds are generally income tax free to beneficiaries. Think about that. Life insurance is income tax free. And most people think of life insurance as only protection, but financially, it can be much more strategic than people realize because it can replace income. It can pay off debt. It can protect children. It can cover estate expenses. It can prevent assets from needing to be sold quickly to pay off mortgages or debt or credit card debt or student loans. And because the payout is generally tax free, it creates immediate liquidity during one of the hardest moments a family may ever experience. And that is incredibly powerful.
Definitely. The next one I'd like to share for a minute about is municipal bonds. So, municipal bonds are ones that, they're not very flashy, but they are extremely tax efficient. So the interest that's earned is generally exempt from federal income tax and sometimes actually state taxes too, which is why these higher income earners, they often pay attention to this because at a certain level, it's not just about what you earn, it's about what you keep after taxes. That's such a common phrase that we use all the time, especially Ben with his American Money 101, financial literacy videos on YouTube. This is where people start learning the difference between high returns and efficient returns. Very, very different conversation. If you guys want to learn a little bit more in depth on that one, definitely check out Ben's YouTube channel, American Money 101.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're here to educate folks, and we want to provide as much value and financial literacy as we can. Because if you're like me, I didn't have a mentor financially. I didn't have anyone teaching me this stuff. I've made a lot of mistakes over the course of my life in just about everything: credit cards, student loans, earned income, different jobs. And so I want to be able to share and be a resource. This last one, I wanted to include something for our veterans, and it's VA disability benefits. So VA disability benefits are one of the clearest examples of tax-free income in our United States system. These benefits are generally not subject to federal income tax, and for many veterans, this becomes a major source of long term financial stability. It's not a loophole and it's also not an investment strategy, but it is recognition for service and sacrifice. And for some families, these benefits become one of the most foundational pieces of their financial plan for decades. And you can have someone that is considered disabled by the VA, but then they're still able to live and have a normal job. And so they will still have a regular job, they'll get a salary, but then they're getting this VA benefit on the side for their service connected disability. And I've done loans for folks that are receiving both. In fact, the two of us just did one here in the last couple of weeks. And it's something that can be used to have a tremendous impact because it is, in most cases, going to be tax free. And when you think about that, it can be used for childcare, it can be used to subsidize a mortgage payment, and all these other affordability costs that we're currently experiencing.
Yeah, so I'd kind of just to wrap it up with, the big takeaway from all of this, and it's actually pretty simple. The tax code rewards certain behavior. They reward ownership, long-term investing, retirement planning, home ownership, legacy planning. And once people understand this, they stop looking at taxes as just something they pay. They start looking at taxes as something to plan around strategically. Because building wealth is not only about how much money you make, again, it's about how much you keep, how much you save. It's also about, how efficiently you keep it, how intelligently you structure it, and how intentionally you transfer it. And that shift in thinking can completely change somebody's financial future. You guys, hope you got a little bit of value out of this one. I know we went through this pretty quickly, but a lot to get through. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to shoot either of us a message on social media. Check out Ben, American Money 101. You can find me at Living in Denver with Adam. And you guys, appreciate you being here. Looking forward to a brand new episode next week. And until then, we'll catch you guys on the other side.
Love you guys. Thank you for tuning in.